Zach, with Brian Smith, who's seemingly locked on everything. I know you challenged Spencer in terms of the locked on everything part of that, but you bring in, I would think, a lot more knowledge, cough Spencer, and a vast knowledge of everything recruiting-wise. That's why you have the Portal Podcast. Where else can everybody find you before we head into segment 2?
I also do Locked On Seminoles. To say the least, that was an interesting 2024 season for all the wrong reasons. You can find us anywhere on social media, X, Instagram, and all that. So Locked On the Portal is the same place you can find all the places for UCLA, of course, Spotify, Apple, and all that too. It's a lot of fun, but very busy right now because we just started the recruiting season. From now until mid-July. Every day is commitment day.
It is seemingly UCLA doing a lot with the 2026, but first they spent the majority of the spring in the transfer portal window, which normally everybody does in the winter. UCLA did certainly a lot of that, but upwards of 16, maybe more in the transfer portal in the spring window. What do you think of UCLA going so much into the portal in the spring? You have a whole spring practice schedule, and then you bring in like almost 20 guys. According to Rivals, it's top 5. According to 24/7 Sports, it's top 20. That's a big gap in terms of what you think they're bringing in. What do you think, Brian, as the host of the Portal Podcast with this knowledge that the Bruins are bringing in? Is it good or bad?
I think it's needed is probably the biggest thing. They lost a lot of guys. You and I were talking about this. Needed defensive help, etc. They got some good players committed for like 26, and that's great. But they needed help now. Those kids ain't going to be here till next year. So they went out and addressed some linemen, some variety. But in totality, it's still 30 players. That's a high number, man. Did they spend their money correctly? Did they get all the positions? Did they get enough high-end talent? I question all of that at least a little bit. But at the same time, they had so many players leave, they had to do it. So my question for you is probably the biggest thing, did they get enough high-end guys? In other words, did they have the NIL to do it? And the answer is?
I would say they spent a lot of it on Nico. Maybe he fell into their lap. And then I think a sneaky steal was Javian Thomas from Cal. But I think that's going to be the thread. That's going to be the theme of this. UCLA probably didn't get the high end. It's a lot of, did they steal the right guys? Did they get those 3 stars ready to turn into those 4 stars that are cheaper? And what I've tried to talk about in this podcast too is you could go through Southern California in the high school ranks or just locally, and you'll find a lot of talent. You probably in the same thing. Florida and other states, California is one of those states you find a bunch of talent. UCLA doesn't have to go far for it. It's just, did they pick the right guys? Other than Nico, the big name isn't there, but I think Javian Thomas would be one of those guys. But then the rest of them, they all got to grow. And Deshaun Foster kept them together despite a terrible start in 2024. But you got to take that next step in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I think, like Thomas, that's a kid that could really run. So I think that's a really high-end player. But did they get enough, especially on defense, that can be game wreckers? Like UCLA's had a few guys in the last few years. You're like, okay, that's a dude. He's going to play in the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. But to really get to the next level as a team, it's about depth, rotating guys in. I think it's Pete Carroll's teams and like Donahue's teams, UCLA in the late 80s, early 90s, those kind of teams. They had players coming off the bench that were as good as yours, especially on defense. They could chase, they could rush the passer, they could drop 7 and just rush forward and get in your face. I need to see that from UCLA, and part of that's just seeing the games this fall. But taking 30 kids, it's intriguing. There's a lot of content for you to discuss because Ward only knows that's a lot of players. But I'm a little nervous when I see the 30 number. The continuity, especially like Johnny got more NIL than I did, et cetera. And the reason I'm concerned about that, I witnessed that firsthand covering Florida State. They made a bunch of big-name acquisitions for Bama, Georgia, schools like that last year, and it caused some chaos. I'm not saying they went the exact same route at UCLA, but the portal can either help you like it did Florida State in 23, or it can kill you like it did Florida State in 24. We'll see what happens with the Bruins.
And the big thing for the Bruins, I know we talked about this before we started this pod, what does UCLA have on the offensive line that could help Nico? And did they address that in the transfer portal, or are they a year away from that when Nico might not even be a Bruin in 2026?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I talked to you about this off air. Like, the elite programs recruit elite offensive linemen out of the high school ranks. And that's pretty much it. They'll add one guy here or there, maybe a center. Like Miami's got a great O-line. Every year they take a center. They want a senior at the pivot. Okay, that's great. But UCLA has recruited O-line so poorly, especially in their own backyard. probably long before Deshaun got there to Westwood, that they're behind the 8 ball. Florida State's in the exact same boat, ironically, and that they took 4 kids out of the portal. They're going to start. They might all leave after this year. Well, you're kind of back to square one. At some point, you got to play the younger guys and take your lumps. Nobody wants to do that, but until you get an experienced line, it's pretty hard. So I need to see how that gels. And remember, Nico and some of these guys that came in the portal, they didn't even practice together in pads in spring. So they got to get used to his voice inflections, all the counts, how he leads. There's so many small things that come with quarterback and O-line. Even if you got the best players, not having spring ball leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm a little skeptical there too.
My question for you is, for Tennessee's O-line last year, the one that Nico played behind, where would you rate them? Were they a great O-line, obviously like national championship worthy, maybe not, but where would you put them? And is there a way the Bruins could maybe reach that if they're like an average O-line?
They were above average. They had a few guys that were pretty good. One of the kids, like Kate Mays or something, I forget the kid's name, but NFL guy. But they didn't have consistency at one of the tackles, and that was a problem. They had a few guys banged up, but they had more talent than what UCLA did. They had some road graders. Now, they also had a big-time running back. So they just ran a lot of really generic inside plays, inside zone, etc. And they were in a lot of 2nd and 5s. But that was Nico's first year. They needed that. As I noted earlier in the pod, UCLA, they may not have the same line as Tennessee, but this is going to be Nico's 2nd year as being a quarterback. I get it that he's not evolved for 2 years in a row, so it's a different offense and all that. But just the growth and maturity as a person, being a year older from like 19 to 20, is a big deal. I know the difference between me every year is out because I matured pretty slow. Like it matters. And I think he'll handle adversity better. And I also think that, again, like I also said, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to find a way, whether it's running the football a little more, whether it's keeping plays alive, giving his receivers time, even if the offensive line's not great. That part I'm not worried about. It's the run game and also Nico just taking big shots. He cannot get hurt. I don't think UCLA is in a position to survive Nico missing any significant time.
And I think UCLA fans remember from last year, Ethan Garbers, obviously not in the same realm as Nico, but he took shots and he had no run game. And the run game was when Ethan Garbers would scramble around. Now it's Tino Sinceri's job to manufacture some productive run game if they don't have the right offensive line. Now they have a new O-line coach with Andy Kwan. I think they're trying to address it. Micah Smith, close to your own backyard. I'm not sure where you are in regards to Vero Beach, but if the Bruins can land him in 2026, that's the future. That just doesn't help them in 2025.
Yeah, I know. We call him Champ. That's his nickname. He's a stud. He's been a kid we've known about since he was a freshman in high school. Vero's a very good program, very loyal. That kid has been recruited by everybody. Ohio State's wanted him forever. He's the kind of guy that can plug and play at UCLA. So you need to start getting some of those kids. So that's as important as a recruit as you will get. And as a reference point, in this past NFL draft, 8 of the first 32 picks were offensive linemen. Coincidence? No. If you don't have big guys up front, you're probably going to suck. At the NFL level, protecting that quarterback is a very big premium anyway. And it's going to be that way at UCLA and every other college football program. So they could get Champ. I mean, that would be the steal. Like, he's an East Coast of Florida kid from a town that's out of the way. It's not near anything. It's the end of Highway 60 on the ocean. It's just middle of nowhere. So for him to go from there to UCLA would be wild. Like, Vero Beach has nothing in common with LA. Zero.
Other than Dodger Town, obviously, the longtime spring training home.
That is cool. That's a cool point.
That would be the only thing, but that's not going to affect some high school kid in 2025 going to UCLA, I would think. But that would be the only connection I could think. But that would be a great get for UCLA to get a national recruiting, go all the way to Florida and steal somebody when the big dogs are going after him.
Oh, 100%.
My fear is, which is probably what happened in the offseason during the early signing period, last second, those pocketbooks, the checks get a little bigger. Obviously, we're waiting to see what NIL looks like in the future, but UCLA can't exactly give a bigger check than somebody else at the last minute changing their minds.
Yeah, the NIL thing, especially with the House settlement, we don't have any precedent to go on, so we're all guessing here. I don't know how that's going to work, because if it gets figured out, and asking any judge or Congress to do anything that I agree with is probably not very likely. And I feel most of the people in the United States agree with that, considering our Congress sucks, but it's coming at one point in time or not. And it's going to be $15 to $17 million a year for most of the major college football programs, UCLA included. How do you spend that? Do you prioritize offensive line? There's all kinds of things. Somebody's going to offer him 7 figures, probably. And it just is what it is. Will that be UCLA? I have no idea. But again, Ohio State really wants it.